any of the coercive sort of mechanisms that get associated with the libertarian left in this country. They are, they call themselves market anarchists largely, and they're not all left, but a large number of them are. But they will fertilize ideas from Rothbard and Carson and Long and people like that, all in the same breath, really. And I keep looking down at this. I've completely lost where I am, which is usually what I do when it comes to these sort of talks. So back to mutualism as an idea. It's not Kevin Carson's on his own, as in it's not 21st century. It is the remnants of, or the renaissance perhaps, of the individualist anarchists from the United States in the 19th century. And they were pretty well inspired by the European left. Josiah Warren was part of the one of Robert Owen's experiments in communal living, New Harmony, I think. Yes. And Lysander Spooner and Tucker were both at the First Internationale with Proudhon and so on, and were both kicked out alongside Proudhon. But they take, for example, their economic policies from, if you like, Ricardian socialism, and they adhere to a form of the labour theory of value rather than subjectivist and so on. But they're one of Tucker's sort of famous articles was comparing state socialism and individualist anarchism, which he both called socialisms, because they ended with their ultimate aim, if you like, as stated, was the end of what he called bossism. That capitalism, as was then and still is to a large extent, actually existing capitalism was, any exploitation that arose out of capitalism did so because of the state weighing in on behalf of capital. And so I'm beginning to see nods. I mean, this is kind of where actually it merges pretty well with people like Murray Rothbard. The mutualists and the individualist anarchists held that there were these four great monopolies that by which the state created all mechanisms of capital exploiting labour and land exploiting labour and so on. The money monopoly, the monopoly of money creation, the monopoly of land tenure guaranteeing. I won't call it land ownership because I'm not entirely sure that it is now, even as a Georgist, but it's certainly of backing up people's rights to hang on to land that they unjustly acquired and so on and so forth, to creating rent, economic rent that others have to pay. The monopoly of creating artificial property in the form of patents and so on, and the monopoly of tariffs, including things like income tax and as a tariff on jobs. And so, just like Rothbard afterwards, they are pretty radical anti-state. They nowadays, most of them or us will tend to talk about the freed market, not the free market, just to try and differentiate it from the actual existing free market that everybody loves to loathe, and to
the actual one.
Well,
we have yet to find it.
The actual one that but people think exist, that one. Yeah. The problem of the individualist anarchists was towards the end of that 19th century, when the state socialist movement was picking up speed and so on. There was a feeling amongst that lot, Tucker and people like that, that corporations in particular had become so large and advantaged by the state that a number of them felt that it was no longer sufficient just to eradicate the state, because a J.D. Rockefeller could ignore anything that the market did and create his own little exploitative fiefdoms in any case. And so a number of the movement sort of fragmented, and a number of them went over into sort of what some of the sort of libertarian left European style, who are, you know, syndicalists and anarcho-communists, that kind of group. And the remainder were so few and far between, largely, that they more or less merged into the emerging anarcho-capitalism and Mises type route. And so for a century or so, they had disappeared. There has been no libertarian political economy that, for example, uses or looks to a labour theory of value, and there has been this feeling that much of libertarianism has anchored itself to actual existing capitalism a bit too much, and fails to recognise that some of that actual existing capitalism is not something that is not necessarily going to leave us free if we happen to be one of the exploited labour class by previously state privileged capitalists. And so this has kind of picked up a bit more speed in the last 20 years or so in the States, with people like Kevin Carson trying to produce a sort of benign left-wing interpretation of anarchism. And really the sort of thing I wanted to get across tonight is in those, I mean, in my exploration, when I've probably read more of the stuff from sort of Mises authors than I have from the likes of Carson, because I find some of his work almost impenetrable economically. I mean, I'm not an economist, and it takes me a long time to read a paragraph that tries to explain economic ideas. But I think there is this image certainly within the UK, that these two movements are somehow irreconcilable, and my message really tonight is that, along with Carson, I would say that they're quite porous, and that actually when you look at a number of forums where particularly younger people are looking at libertarianism, anarchism as an idea, a lot of them are creeping over from a state welfarist position, and that the language of mutualism is a way of getting them hooked into mainstream libertarianism. I think once they're captivated by that, you know, it is, rather than it being something to cause divisions, it's actually a way of getting people into the movement who perhaps, like me, would have been put off by colleagues explaining that it was